There live a prince in history born of fire and ambition, a son destined to rule two empires, a shadow cast by the greatest names in history. Yet, his fate was sealed long before he could wear his crown. Who was Caesarion, the last pharaoh of Egypt? And why was his very existence a threat to the might of Rome? To understand Caesarion's tragic fate, we must journey back to a love that shook the world, to a legacy carved in blood, and to the forces that conspired to erase his name from history. Julius Caesar, a man whose very name struck fear into the hearts of his enemies, had many lovers. But only one dared to challenge the power of Rome itself, Cleopatra VII, the Queen of Egypt. Their affair was not mere passion, it was an empire-defining gamble. And from their union, a child was born, a boy destined to rewrite the future. His name? Ptolemaic 15 Philopator Philometor Caesar, known to history as Caesarion. To the Egyptians, he was more than a prince, he was divine. The living embodiment of Horus, the rightful heir to the throne of Egypt, and perhaps, one day, of Rome itself. His birth was heralded as a sign of the gods' favor. But beyond the golden walls of Alexandria, dark forces whispered of treachery. For to Rome, Caesarion was a dangerous anomaly, a rival claimant to an empire that brooked no equals. Cleopatra wasted no time securing his future. If Rome would not recognize him, Egypt would. She declared him her co-ruler, pharaoh of the two lands. A bold move, but a necessary one. The queen knew that the world was no place for the weak. Every moment was a battle, every breath an act of defiance against the Roman Senate that sought to control her fate. But in the halls of Rome, whispers turned to plans, and plans turned to threats. Caesarion's very existence was a problem, one that certain men would stop at nothing to erase. He was, after all, not just the son of Cleopatra. He was the son of Julius Caesar. And that alone was enough to put a target on his back. And so, the dice were cast. The child of legends had been born. But his fate was yet to be written. The conqueror of Gaul. The master of Rome. Julius Caesar had returned, not as a man, but as a legend in the making. And yet, legends have a way of casting long shadows, shadows that breed fear, envy, and ambition. Among the Roman elite, whispers turned to murmurs, murmurs turned to plots. But in Egypt, Cleopatra saw something else, a future for her son, a future entwined with the greatest empire in history. Though Caesar never officially acknowledged Caesarion as his heir, Cleopatra had no doubt this was the rightful son of Rome's greatest leader. She declared it to the world, proclaiming him as Caesar's only true successor. But in Rome, her words carried a far more dangerous weight. They threatened the ambitions of another, a young, calculating heir waiting in the shadows. Octavian. To the Roman elite, Cleopatra's claim was an insult. It was a challenge to the established order, a direct affront to the carefully laid plans of Julius Caesar's chosen successor, his grandnephew, Octavian. The power struggle for Rome had begun long before swords were drawn. And at its center, a boy who had yet to take his first steps into history. Then came the fateful day, March 15, 44 BC. The Ides of March. Julius Caesar, betrayed, surrounded, outnumbered. Stabbed 23 times by men who once called him friend. As his blood pooled on the cold marble floor, so too did the hopes of Cleopatra. Thousands of miles away, Cleopatra's world shattered. Rome was no longer a promised land. It was a graveyard of broken oaths. And with Caesar dead, her son's claim to the throne was now a curse rather than a blessing. The walls of power had closed in, and in their shadows lurked the rising storm named Octavian. Cleopatra was not one to surrender to fate. She knew that Rome's power could only be matched by another force from within. She needed an ally, a warrior, a leader with the strength to challenge Octavian. And in the chaos left by Caesar's death, one man emerged as the answer to her prayers, Mark Antony. A soldier. A statesman. A man of excess, of charm, and of undeniable power. Cleopatra saw in him not just a lover, but a weapon. If Rome would not recognize her son's right to rule, then she would forge her own destiny, with Antony by her side. Mark Antony was one of the most powerful men in Rome, and Cleopatra saw an opportunity to secure her son's legacy. The two rulers formed an alliance, one of love, war, and defiance against Rome's new master, Octavian. Together, they dreamed of an empire stretching from Rome to Egypt, with Caesarion as its ruler. But Octavian was determined to destroy them. He branded Cleopatra and Antony as enemies of Rome and launched a full-scale invasion. September 2nd, 31 BC. The gods had abandoned Egypt. The Battle of Action was not merely a war between Rome and the East, it was a war of fate, where the dreams of a dynasty collided with the relentless march of an empire. Cleopatra and Mark Antony, once rulers of vast domains, now found themselves outmatched, outmaneuvered, and betrayed by the very forces they had once trusted. The end had begun. As the battle turned, so too did fortune. Mark Antony, the once mighty general, watched as his fleet was surrounded, his allies defecting one by one. Cleopatra, ever the strategist, made a fateful decision. She ordered her ships to break formation, to flee, to live to fight another day. But Antony saw it differently. To him, it was betrayal. His army crumbled, his pride shattered. The weight of the world came crashing down. By the time Antony returned to Alexandria, whispers filled the streets. Rome was coming. Octavian, cold and calculated, was closing in. But Antony heard something else, a rumor that Cleopatra was dead. His heart, already heavy with failure, could take no more. He did what Roman honor demanded as he took his own life. Too late. The final trick of fate had been played. Cleopatra still lived, hidden within the walls of her unfinished tomb. And now, with Antony gone, she was truly alone. What goes through the mind of a queen who knows her kingdom has fallen? What thoughts linger in the silence before the storm? Cleopatra had ruled as a goddess, as a warrior, as a lover of two of Rome's greatest men. But now, she was merely a prisoner in her own city, waiting for Octavian's arrival. Octavian had learned from the mistakes of his predecessors. Julius Caesar had been seduced by Cleopatra's charm, Mark Antony had been ensnared by her beauty, but Octavian? Octavian was different. He was a man who valued victory over passion, control over indulgence. He would not be swayed by Cleopatra's words. He did not need her love, only her submission. The Queen of Egypt knew what Rome did to defeated rulers. She knew the humiliation they had planned. Chains, mockery, a slow march through the streets of Rome where she would be paraded as a conquered prize before the jeering masses. She would rather die a queen than live as a spectacle. And so, she made her final move. In a moment that would be etched in history, Cleopatra embraced death, just as she had embraced power. The serpent's bite was swift. Her breath slowed. And with her last exhale, the final ruler of the Ptolemaic dynasty was gone. The world she had fought to protect slipped into darkness. Rome had won. And yet, with her death, something was lost, a world that might have been, a future that would never come to pass. The Queen of Kings, the daughter of the Nile, had chosen her own ending. And in doing so, she became immortal. As Octavian's forces entered Alexandria, Caesarion was urged to flee. Advisors whispered of a route to India, a land far from Rome's reach. But he hesitated. Perhaps he still believed in his divine right to rule. Then came the ultimate deception. Octavian, the future Augustus Caesar, sent word that he would allow Caesarion to live. Perhaps out of arrogance or a desperate hope for mercy, the boy returned to Alexandria. But mercy was not Octavian's way. In 30 BC, at just 17 years old, Caesarion was executed. The last son of Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, was gone. His name, his legacy, erased from history by the man who would go on to become the first emperor of Rome. Though his reign was brief and his life was tragic, Caesarion remains one of the greatest what-ifs in history. What if he had lived? What if he had ruled Rome and Egypt together? Could the world have been different? Caesarion may have been the last pharaoh, but his story, his tragedy, lives on. He was the son of legends, a prince without a throne, and a shadow lost to time. What do you think? Was Caesarion's fate sealed from the moment he was born, or could history have taken a different path? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Niger Trends TV for more incredible stories from the past. And hey, if you want to learn more about Julius Caesar and the Roman Empire, click on the video on your right to learn about the Roman Empire, to learn about their rise and the fall of the empire. Until next time, stay curious. Bye for now.